Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is Voice of the Global South. All right then, let's get started. On the show this week, Israel and Syria are negotiating a historic security pact. What's driving this thaw? Trump wants the Bagram airbase back from the Taliban. Is it a masterstroke or mission impossible? And Trump ends sanctions waiver for Chabahar port in Iran. How will India overcome this geopolitical gut punch? All that and much, much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. Ahmed al-Shara has become the first Syrian leader since 1967 to address the United Nations General Assembly. From a former Al-Qaeda terrorist with a $10 million bounty on his head to a statesman dressed in a grey tailored suit and burgundy tie, the transformation was complete as he took the podium. He was equally at ease shaking hands with world leaders and posing for photographers. How a 42-year-old Syrian went from being a jihadist to being feted in New York City is a question that even a former US general could not resist asking him.
Please help us understand how you got from Al-Qaeda in Iraq 20 years ago to where you are today, Syria's head of state on stage in New York City. Please help us understand how you got...
It was a rare encounter between a man who once waged jihad against American forces in Iraq and a former US general. If you didn't know it already, General Petraeus was the head of the multinational forces in Iraq while al-Shara was fighting and imprisoned there for 5 years between 2006 and 2011. And here's al-Shara's reply. Take a listen.
At a time when we were in combat and then we now move to the discourse, we went from war to discourse. Someone who went through war is one who knows most the importance of peace.
Surreal coming from a former terrorist. This man is now pushing for peace with Israel. Given a history of conflict and the enormity of what is at stake, the world has to perforce take him at his word when he says that after decades of rockets, raids and rhetoric, Syria wants to live in peace with Israel. But the question is Ahmed al-Shara the man for it? And will Netanyahu oblige? Syria and Israel have technically been at war since 1948, but they opened direct talks after the December 2024 ouster of Syria's longtime ruler, Bashar al-Assad. Syria hopes to finalize a security pact with Israel by the end of this year.
This course is ongoing regarding peace, number 74. I believe that we have reached advanced stages and I hope that that will lead us to an agreement that will keep the sovereignty of Syria and also resolve some of the security fears for Israel.
Within 5 months of coming to power, al-Shara had gained an audience with President Donald Trump. They met in Saudi Arabia. Trump promised cash and legitimacy in return for peace with Israel. And almost immediately, al-Shara took Trump up on his offer. Talks kicked off in earnest, first indirectly and then via direct channels. These negotiations spanned many cities and continents. The US moved quickly and removed al-Shara's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham from the list of terrorist groups. Trump also ended some sanctions in June, but not all. US lawmakers are debating if and when to repeal the act that imposed wide-ranging sanctions on Syria. But the Israelis have been lobbying US lawmakers and policymakers alike to keep sanctions in place, arguing that the US should not give away all its leverage on Syria in one fell swoop. But al-Shara is pushing for complete lifting of sanctions. He warned that the region would face a new round of tumult unless Israel reaches a security agreement with his government.
Israeli threats against our country have not subsided since December 8th until today. Israeli policies are operating in a manner that contradicts the international position supporting Syria and its people, in an attempt to exploit the transitional phase, which exposes the region to entering a cycle of new conflicts, the end of which no one knows. In response, Syria will use dialogue and diplomacy to overcome this crisis and pledge its commitment to the 1974 disengagement agreement.
A quick word about the deal that's being negotiated. It would see Israel halt its cross-border attacks in exchange for Syria agreeing not to move heavy equipment near the Israeli frontier. Syria, as you might know, is just coming out of a 14-year-long civil war that killed 500,000, displaced millions more, and left its economy in ruins. Al-Shara believes that a security deal with Israel would persuade the West to pour in much-needed money for Syria's reconstruction. As for Israel, a security pact with Syria could mean a quieter northern border, no more surprise rocket barrages from Syrian soil. And if Syria eventually decides to join the Abraham Accords, much like how the UAE, Bahrain and Morocco normalized their ties with Israel in the year 2020, well, it would be another big win for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu spoke about possibilities of peace opening up in his address to the UN General Assembly.
Israel's victories over the Iranian terror axis have opened up possibilities for peace that were unthinkable 2 years ago. Take Syria. For decades, the very idea of peace between Israel and Syria seemed unimaginable. Well, no more. Today, we have begun serious negotiations with the new Syrian government. I believe an agreement can be reached that respects Syria's sovereignty and protects both Israeli security and the security of the minorities in the region, including the Druze minority.
But, and this is an important but, Al-Shara says it is too early for Syria to even begin discussing about recognizing Israel because trust is thin.
Those who are part of the Accord parties to the Abraham Accords are not neighbors to Israel. For instance, Syria as a neighbor has been subjected to over 1,000 raids, strikes and incursions. Israeli incursions in Syria from the Golan Heights, and many were killed. So what applies to the parties in the Abrahamian Accords doesn't apply to Syria.
Then there are the outstanding issues of the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon. The Golan is a 1,200 square kilometer plateau that Israel captured in 1967 and annexed in 1981. It gives Israel a commanding view of the area and acts as a shield against attacks. The world, UN included, still calls it occupied Syrian land. But the US under Trump recognized it as Israel's back in 2019, and that has stuck. And at nearly 9,000 feet, Mount Hermon is the crown jewel, Syria's highest peak that straddles the border. So, will Israel vacate the occupied lands? The short answer is no. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar says it is non-negotiable. Israel will hold on to the Golan Heights, something that even Al-Shara acknowledges. The Syrian leader says the current talks are not about the Golan Heights or Mount Hermon. Netanyahu's office says any deal is contingent on ensuring the interests of Israel, which include the demilitarization of southwestern Syria and preserving the safety and security of the Druze in Syria. Remember, clashes erupted in July in Saavedra, the Druze-heavy southern region of Syria, and Israel bombed the area in defense of the Druze. The Druze are an ethno-religious community. The Golan Heights is home to 25,000 Druze. They maintain close ties with Israel.
Of Israel, Jews and Druze have been brothers in arms. We have fought together. We've bled together. We built our lives together. When I was a young commander in Israel's Special Forces, my own life was saved by the invaluable advice given to me by a great friend, Salim Shufi, a heroic Druze IDF veteran. And that's why I couldn't sit idly by, nor could Israel sit idly by, while the Druze were being slaughtered by jihadists. And I instructed our forces to stop the massacre, which they promptly did.
So Netanyahu is firm, no vacating the Golan Heights. Israel also gets to keep the Mount Hermon outpost indefinitely for security. So all things considered, Syria and Israel are at best negotiating what can only be called a security first, peace later pact. There's one concern though, and that is how will Turkey and its leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan view Syria's moves for peace with Israel? Because get this, there is no love lost between Erdogan and Netanyahu, especially after Erdogan succeeded in installing al-Shura in Damascus and turning Syria into a proxy that's dependent on Turkey, something even Trump acknowledged when he hosted Erdogan for talks in the White House.
Well, I think President Erdogan is the one responsible for Syria, for the successful fight in ridding Syria of its past leader. Announcement today, he was responsible for that victory. It was a victory for Turkey.
We began the show by quoting what al-Shura had to tell General Petraeus. He said, "Someone who went through war is one who knows most the importance of peace." I would end by quoting another Syrian, a woman who, along with her compatriots, gathered outside the UN headquarters to celebrate the presence of al-Shura in New York City. This woman, who sported a "Make Syria Great Again" cap, had something equally profound to say.
We want him to make peace with Israel, because if there is no peace, there is no development.
No peace, no development. Like her, many around the world will wonder, can Israel and Syria overcome the hesitations of history to go from being foes to friends? We'll keep you posted for updates. After Canada, the Panama Canal and Greenland, now Trump wants the Bagram air base in Afghanistan. For Trump, it's about projecting power and reversing a perceived loss. For Afghans, it's about sovereignty. Why does Trump want the base back? What makes it so special? And will reclaiming Bagram escalate US-China tensions and potentially reignite conflict? As Abhishek Bose finds out in the next report, the outcome is uncertain.
We're trying to get it back.
Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, once the largest US military hub in Central Asia, is again at the center of global attention. President Donald Trump has warned that Afghanistan must return the base to the United States or face consequences. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, and I quote, "If Afghanistan doesn't give Bagram Air Base back to those that built it, the United States of America, bad things are going to happen," unquote. But why is this airfield so important? What makes Bagram unique? And why decades after invading and then leaving is Washington DC still interested in it? Let's rewind to its history. Bagram is not just any military post. It was built by Soviet Union in the 1950s when both Moscow and Washington DC were competing for influence in Afghanistan. During the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, it was the Soviets' main stronghold. After their withdrawal in 1989, the base was abandoned. But soon it became a frontline battleground between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance in the 1990s. The Northern Alliance was a coalition of militias that fought against the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan between 1996 and 2001. The alliance was primarily composed of non-Pashtun ethnic groups from northern Afghanistan, including Tajiks, Uzbeks, and the Hazaras. After the 11th September 2001 attacks, the United States and its coalition forces seized Bagram and transformed it into their largest base in Afghanistan. Over the next 20 years, it grew into a sprawling, self-contained city. It had 2 runways, including one almost 12,000 feet long, strong enough for B-52 bombers and heavy cargo planes. The base hosted more than 30,000 troops and contractors at its peak, with hospitals, fuel depots, fast food joints, and even the controversial Parwan detention facility, which drew comparisons to the Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. From Washington, D.C., Bagram was the epicenter of the war on terror. Intelligence gathering, drone operations, and combat missions across Afghanistan and beyond were all launched from here. But in 2021, when US forces fully withdrew, Bagram was vacated in July and then fell to the Taliban in August. For the Taliban, it was a major symbolic victory. For the United States, a bitter moment. So what makes it different from any other base? There are 3 major things. First, location. It sits at the crossroads of South Asia and Central Asia. From its runways, aircraft can reach Iran to the west, Pakistan to the east, and even Western China and Central Asia within hours. Second, the infrastructure. Unlike smaller forward posts, it was designed to sustain long operations. It had hardened shelters, advanced medical facilities, surveillance hubs, and housing for thousands. It could function independently like a fortress. And third, the intelligence value. From Bagram, the United States could watch Russian moves in Central Asia, Iranian activity to the west, and China's projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. For Washington, D.C., it was a goldmine for surveillance and signals intelligence. No other spot in the region combines these advantages in one place. And maybe these are the points that make President Trump seem that much interested in Bagram.
We were going to keep Bagram, the big air base, one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to him for nothing. We're trying to get it back, by the way.
He even linked Bagram to China, claiming that it is just an hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons.
We're trying to get it back because they need things from us. We want that base back. But one of the reasons we want the base is, as you know, it's an hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons.
Experts note that the nearest known Chinese nuclear test site, Lopur, is actually over 2,000 kilometers away. But still, the message is clear. Trump sees Bagram not just as a counter-terrorism hub, but as a forward base to check China, Russia, and Iran. But the Taliban have flatly rejected Trump's demand.
اینکه در برابر خاکمان یک وجب خاکمان یک بلیست خاکمان با کسی تعامل شود این چیزی است که هیچ امکان نداره و امکان پذیر نیست.
Beijing also weighed in.
China respects Afghanistan's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. The future and destiny of Afghanistan should be held in the hands of the Afghan people. I want to stress that stoking tensions and creating confrontation in the region wins no popular support.
For the Taliban, ceding Bagram would mean giving up a symbol of sovereignty they've fought for decades to reclaim. For China, keeping the United States out of Afghanistan reduces the pressure on its western border. But here lies the central question. Can the US really return to Bagram?
We'll see what happens with Bagram. We're talking to Afghanistan. It should have never been given up. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. There was no reason to give it up. I was leaving Afghanistan. I was leaving. I was the one that got it down to 5,000 soldiers, but we were going to keep Bagram. the airbase. I said it yesterday, and we had an incredible trip, as you know, to UK, and I said it during the press conference. It's one of the most powerful runways ever built in terms of weight, length, and load, what it could take, and we just gave it up for nothing. We gave it up for nothing. There was no reason to give it up.
Regaining it would likely mean either of the two options. First, a military re-invasion involving tens of thousands of troops and major resources. Experts say that it would be prohibitively costly and politically unpopular. Or second, a diplomatic agreement with the Taliban, which seems unlikely since Taliban leaders insist no foreign troops will be allowed on Afghan soil. During his first term, Trump himself signed the 2020 Doha Agreement with the Taliban, promising US withdrawal in exchange for counter-terrorism guarantees. That deal made no mention of bases like Bagram. Now, trying to return raises credibility issues. Would Washington, D.C. break its own commitments? In the end, it is about more than an airfield. It's about power in Central Asia. Trump may want it back, but history shows that no foreign power can hold Afghanistan without local support. Whether America can ever regain it remains an open question. Abhishek Bose's report for DD India.
In a move that could reshape strategic equations across Asia, the US will end sanctions waiver for Iran's Chabahar port on the 29th of September. With this, international actors, including India, which, by the way, is the port's largest foreign investor, now face the threat of US sanctions. What does this mean for regional trade and connectivity, India's strategic interests, and the wider geopolitics of the global south? Shivam Mishra reports.
On the windswept coast of southeastern Iran, Chabahar port was hailed as a historic opportunity, a gateway for India to unlock access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing regional rival Pakistan. Chabahar is Iran's only deep-sea port, with direct access to the Indian Ocean located in the Gulf of Oman. The deep-water port offered a lifeline to international markets, bulwarking its economy against Western sanctions. All this now hangs in the balance as the US, sticking to its maximum pressure policy, has announced the end of Chabahar's sanctions waiver with effect from September 29. Since 2018, the US has carved out a rare exception for Chabahar, shielding it from broad Iran sanctions in recognition of its value for Afghanistan's development and India's efforts to promote regional stability. But the Trump government has reversed course. The US State Department warns that any entity, be it Indian, Iranian, or any other dealing with the port after September risks American penalties under the Iran Freedom and Counter-Proliferation Act. US penalties could freeze bank accounts, block global suppliers, or blacklist Indian firms from American markets. The Chabahar port is about 550 nautical miles or 1,000 kilometers from India's Kandla port in Gujarat, making it a quick sail for ships from Mumbai or beyond. Built in the 1970s, but really ramping up in the 2010s, Chabahar has two key terminals, Shahid Beheshti, where most of the action happens, and Shahid Kalantari. It can handle massive vessels, over 100,000 tons, dwarfing what Iran's other big port, Bandar Abbas, can manage. New Delhi now faces daunting choices. For India, Chabahar is not just another port. Its involvement in the port began in 2002, when Hassan Rouhani, the National Security Advisor to President Saeed Mohammad Khatami, held discussions with his Indian counterpart Brajesh Mishra. Following Khatami's visit to India in 2003, he and Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee signed a roadmap of strategic cooperation, one of the key projects in which was Chabahar. India proposed Chabahar's development in 2003 to facilitate trade routes to landlocked Afghanistan and Central Asia. India, Iran, and Afghanistan signed a trilateral agreement in April 2016, after which the Indian Shipping Ministry worked at a rapid pace towards developing the port. In December 2017, the first phase of Shahid Beheshti port was inaugurated, and India sent its first consignment of wheat to Afghanistan through Chabahar the same year. Since 2018, Indian Ports Global Limited has operated in the Shahid Beheshti terminal funneling food and humanitarian aid into Afghanistan and exporting essential goods such as pharmaceuticals and engineering components. In May 2024, India and Iran inked a 10-year deal backed by a $250 million credit line for expansion. New Delhi says that it is examining implications.
See, you would have seen the press statement which was issued by the US side yesterday on revocation of sanctions waiver that applies to Chabahar port. We are presently examining the implications that this revocation has for India.
The Chabahar port is also integral to the international north-south transport corridor which connects India with Russia via Iran and Central Asia. The corridor was initiated by an intergovernmental agreement by India, Russia and Iran at the turn of the century. It comprises 13 members: India, Iran, Russia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkey, Ukraine, Belarus, Oman and Syria. Bulgaria has joined as an observer state. The corridor's route is from Mumbai to Russia and beyond via Chabahar, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan or Central Asia. It offers a more efficient and cost-effective alternative for transporting goods between India, Russia and the Central Asian countries. While the Suez Canal route takes 45 to 60 days, the international north-south transport corridor route is 40% shorter and 30% cheaper. In 2021, a container ship, the Ever Given, ran aground in the Suez Canal, causing disruptions and heavy losses in maritime trade. The incident created an urgency for alternative shipping routes. For Iran, caught in an economic distress, Chabahar has brought jobs and hope. The port's expansion was a rare example of South-South cooperation. Now, if India pulls out, Iran may seek alternative investors for port development, including deepening its courtship with China or Russia, thereby locking out Western-aligned interests even further. Chabahar sits just 170 kilometers west of Pakistan's Gwadar port, which China has poured billions into as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. Every which way one looks at it, Chabahar is more than just cargo and containers. It's a contest for strategic autonomy over routes, resources and influence across Asia's heartland. As the 29 September deadline looms, uncertainty hangs over the port and the fate that will befall the region. Only time will tell if this port remains a bridge or becomes a barrier. Shivam Mishra for DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.